McKenna, Jewel Rhodes, and Cardoza, LLP, is located at 414 Salem Street in downtown Chico, and their phone is 342-3593. Well, hopefully everyone is having a pretty good night out there, staying cool, because my goodness, it has been hot. Tonight we have Sarah Niederholzer.
Yes,
I was right? Did I get it right?
Yes, you got it.
Yes, cool. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Good. Nice to be in the AC and not outside.
Yes.
It is crazy hot.
Thank goodness. And tonight we have Brandon with us. How are you doing, Brandon?
Hey, nice to be back.
It sounds like I got the mics correct. And as I said, this is Writing on Air, where we like to take people's writing, and it's not a critique show. We sometimes get that confused. This is more of like an appreciation show. As we've said many times, we are the picture frame and you guys are the picture. And I'm sure everyone who listens is super annoyed with me saying that because I say it every show because it's the best intro. And if you want to be part of the show and you want to submit, you can do so through our Facebook or our email, write.onair@gmail.com.
That's write.onair@gmail.com.
Perfect. Spot on, Brandon. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sarah.
So I am a Yuba City native. I just moved to Chico last year in the fall, a Butte College student, working in town, living in town, really liking it so far, yeah. And I've been writing my whole life, but creative writing is a newer thing for me, so I'm excited to share with you guys.
Yeah, and you said before the show, too, this is your first time sharing with people other than friends.
It is, yeah. First time reading it to anybody and first time sharing it with people outside my little circle.
This is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so stoked for this. I've read a few of the pieces beforehand, and they're really cool. You guys are in for a treat. What piece would you like to read first?
Okay, so I've never been terribly good at naming my pieces, but I called this one Pulling Teeth, so I can write about this one. Do we need any prep?
Yes, yeah, thanks for reminding me on that. So usually at the end of the shows, we ask people advice for writing and what writing means to them, kind of along those line of questionings. And when we read this piece, we thought this would be perfect to go first with that question in mind. So what does writing mean to you? Advice to other authors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the only advice to give to other writers is just write. It's not easy, and it's not, it doesn't always come fluidly, leisurely, pretty. Allow yourself, this is something my dad says, allow yourself the grace of a really bad first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. What you write doesn't have to be great. It just matters that you wrote. So
he's a wise man.
That is what he is. That is what writing means to me and kind of the advice that I would give to writers. And that's the inspiration for this piece. So with that, I will read it.
Pulling teeth.
Yeah. Sometimes writing is like pulling teeth. The sort of thing that, yeah, this really needs to be done, but stop hurting so much. I want to write when I'm happy and to be proud of it. I want to go outside when I'm sad instead of crouched at my desk carving thoughts into a journal. To write is to stay sane. It is also to drive yourself mad, to shove yourself right to the jumping off point of insanity, but that sentence was actually really good, so you take a few steps back and listen to the bits that crumbled off hit the bottom of the ravine below. Writing is a passion, and it is also a curse. A curse for the perfectionists and for the artists and for those who feel everything more like a tidal wave than a tidal pool. So you let go of the words, you expel the emotion, you shuffle back to your sadness and ask it to return because you have convinced yourself that that is where your creativity makes its home. And who are you without words? Without words that didn't come from suffering or the memory of sitting on your bed, waiting for the tears to stop making your face so red? Without the lead in your legs after a sleepless night? Writing allows for a margin of error, so my advice to the writers, you, me, or even the ones who have made it, let yourself love these words pouring from your chest out your mouth, splatter unapologetically onto your page. I know we use Microsoft or something like that now, but keep that journal with you. Force yourself to write when you're happy and when you're scared and when you're crawling on your hands and knees back to that sadness, turn around. No matter what you read back to yourself when you're done, you have contributed the priceless gift of guts and creation and carrying a piece of art that is yours alone into this world, even if your eyes are the only ones who ever see it. And if it hurts, keep writing. It means you're doing something right.
Man, I'm really glad you came on the show because a lot of the things we talk about are completely put in that piece. First off, congratulations for reading your first piece ever on air.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Brandon, go ahead. I think I saw a twinkle in your eye.
I think this piece is perfect in the way it describes what writing is like. I wrote a 100-page book, every single page in that book had 50 plus errors that I had to correct, and I've got I don't know how many pages on my computer that I will never show anyone because I wrote it and it's bad and I never want anyone to see it, but I can't delete it because I wrote it and it's a look at what I was feeling then.
And I really like, and again, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but I really want to point it out, writing not just for the sad things, which is the really kind of...
Yeah, and that's something that I have struggled with a lot and do struggle with a lot because I find it, at least in a lot of people that I talk to that are writers, find it a lot easier to write when you're sad and when you're down and, angsty and you have all this emotion pent up, isn't positive emotion. And I talked about it in the piece, and I talk about it to people all the time. It's like, I want to be able to write about things and then look back with fondness and not always think about the low point or wow, I'm really glad I got past that, but that was horrible, that type of thing. So I think it's something that I've made a point to do, is make myself write when I'm in a good place.
Yeah. And not to mention, too, your writing style will be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
It gives you a full picture. A lot of people do use writing as a form of therapy, and I think that should go both ways. Mm-hmm. It should be the positive and the negative. So this piece is, amazing. I'm glad we were able to read that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other words on that one, Brendan?
No, it's a great commentary on what writing is to, I think, most people. People that write because they need to, and they do tend to write from a sadder place, from a darker place, because it's how they work through all their emotions. And the people that can write when they're happy, all the power to you. You are amazing people. But yeah, writing is a struggle and also kind of an addiction. You feel you have to when you have to, and it changes all the time.
And there was one point when I had read this by myself that I really liked, just for the imagery that the word kind of evokes, or the sentence kind of evokes. And it's a curse for the perfectionist and for the artist and for those who feel everything more like a tidal wave than a tidal pool. I love that line. That's my favorite line of that piece.
Thank you very much.
I'm not even going to explain it. I think that it stands for itself. It's super, super cool. But I want to dive into your second one because we're rolling through this show, and I don't want to miss your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second one. It's titled Reward versus Risk, and it's about, I write a lot about, I write about love. I like to write about love because I am somebody who feels emotions really big and very large, and they get so big and large that I feel like I have to expel them, I have to get rid of them, I have to write them down. And it's not always a negative thing. I think writing about love in any form is one of the things that I do that, one of the ways I write that isn't about sadness or a bad place. So with that, I will read this. So when you meet your someone you might not know for a long time, they might creep up on you slowly, and one day they're just standing right in front of you, like, what took you so long? They might crash into you and make your life look like the aftermath of a hurricane for a little while. You might accidentally overlook them for a long time, or even purposely look past them for a while. But your someone will not go unnoticed. And you'll catch yourself looking for them in crowds or hearing their names on the lips of strangers. They'll have too much power over you in the beginning, much to your discomfort, but they'll be just as uncomfortable with your hold on them. You might not admit it to them or to yourself for a long time that you love them, but you'll know you do far before it's spoken into existence. You may let them go, and they may do the same. It might be before you're ready, it might be too late. Their touch will linger on your skin, their smell hang in the air you breathe, and their eyes be present in every beautiful photograph and every fine art painting you see for the rest of your life. Then you'll be familiar with the deafening feeling of standing in a gorgeous place and feeling so desperate to have them beside you because you cannot fathom that they are missing this. But imagine if they weren't missing it. If they were standing next to you in that museum looking at something that could never possibly be as beautiful as they are. If you go to sleep 23 and wake up 47 to reach across the bed and turn the lamp off when they fell asleep with their nose in a book. If you get promoted at work and it doesn't feel real until you hear their voice cheering you on until the other side of the phone. If you don't have to face things alone anymore. If you look back at memories without them and imagine how much they would have loved it. That's your someone. Sometimes it fails miserably. Sometimes you stumble away confused with little left to lose, or it may deal out its fair share of things you could live without. But what if the reward trumps the risk?
Go ahead, Brennan. I have a lot of things. Okay, I'm gonna monopolize this conversation then. I was writing some things down. A lot of times when people speak about a love or topics around that, breakups or whatever, anything, it usually is negative, as you've said, where it comes from a strong spot. But I am especially fond of the really gentle pieces, the ones that aren't like, oh, it's the overwhelming, this crazy emotion. It just starts out very light and very kind of like the small, tiny details. Those are usually... I love reading those. They're super, super fun. Yeah. I already said the small details part, but also I absolutely love the aspect of time that you put in there. So where you start off saying like, well, you fall asleep at this point, but you wake up, because that shows like a bunch of things about how you write. You don't write just for the singular, oh, well, I'm sure you do in some cases, but not for this piece. You don't write just for the instant. You write for, let's look at the picture of it, the whole totality of like, oh, this could last for a long time, and you could have so much more than what you're just feeling right in this moment. It could be lasting, it could be longer, it could have full breadth of emotion to it. This piece really excites me because of that, because it's really cool, because it feels like discussing a lifelong kind of like path to love, which is really, really an interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah, and I really do. I feel like I think about that a lot. I read about that a lot, like the lifelong path of things, and the length of relationships, or the length of feelings, or things like that, because it is so varied with relationships. You never know what you're getting into, really. You don't, and that's part of the beauty and the terror of it all. But yeah, I wrote that from a really, really, warm place in my heart for somebody that I love a lot. And it's one of those things that I do look back on, and when I read it, when I come across it, I remind myself of that person, remind myself of the length of the possibility of the length of love and relationships and stuff. Yeah. Someone
once said to me, the details matter in relationships, like very, very small things. I forget what the context was in that, but that line always stuck with me, that the details really matter. And I appreciate that this piece really is pointing out, like, well, look at these like very tiny things that can mean so much about the person, because really life is just made up of small details. It's rare that we have these huge events and things. It's more often than not we experience the small things, and they aren't really always talked about. So that's a really phenomenal piece.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any words, Brennan? Sure, Brennan?
Yes, I'm sure.
Fantastic. All right. I'm excited for this piece because you have some things to talk about, right? It's a newer piece.
I do. So this is one of the pieces that I wrote more recently that I wasn't originally planning on reading, but it's something that I've wanted to write about for a long time, and I like to talk about it. And it's really not easy to talk about religion, and from a point of view of somebody, speaking on myself, who is not religious in a traditional way. So it's something that I've always kind of grappled with, and really wished that I could find it within myself, the blind faith, or however you want to describe religion in any form. I grew up around people who were Christian, and I respect it so much, and I have so much love for that. But this piece is kind of about my battle with what I see as spirituality, what I see as something, as a higher power, and something that means, the core of my being, as religion and God is for a lot of people. So I call it Define God. I've been asked the question, do you believe in God, too many times in the past 18 years. I never really know how to respond, because people are already looking for a specific answer. My answer is yes, but not in the way most want to hear it. When I think about God, capital G God is not what comes to mind. I don't see holiness or shining lights and halos. First, I might see wandering hallways of overfilled bookstores, or smell coffee grounds early on a Sunday morning. I sometimes look across a wide lake, the sunset reflecting like a sea of burning embers over soft ripples. Most of the time, I think about the feeling I get reading the last line in a book you really loved, or a kiss after too long without them. I don't see acts of God as life-saving miracles, but I do see the world being lifted from my shoulders just before my nose scrapes the asphalt. I feel the sigh of relief after making it through something you were sure was burying you alive. So yes, I do believe in a higher power of sorts. I believe in the fire growing from the pit of my stomach and into my heart, engulfing all I do with a passion I do not understand. Perhaps it's the thirst of my brain to quench the wildfire in my bones, to cool my singed skin, or quiet the anxiety funneling through my ears. What I do know is that wherever you look, there are acts of God, of the universe, rather. Whether you see it in the eyes of a lover or the sunlight through the trees, notice it and remind yourself what God is to you. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a complicated question when someone asks anyone, do you believe in God? Do you have a religion? Because I think I would find it silly to not look up to anything, because I think it would be disheartening not to have faith in anything besides, humans, which is a scary
disheartening.
thought. Yeah, disheartening. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, writing and words and books and art have always been kind of my higher power, I guess, or my something to fall back on that was always going to be there for me when, I didn't think anybody else was or anything else was working out. That was something that was always there. I've always been a reader. I've always loved poetry. I can shout out my dad again for that. But yeah, absolutely. I think that, that explanation isn't always taken very well. But it's also, I don't blame them, because it's not something that everybody has, and it's not something that's particularly easy to explain. So, yeah.
It's a very intimate subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to discuss. I wanted to point out, too, before, Brandon, if you have any comments, I'm going to monopolize again. I like the similarities between this one and the one that you just read, as far as, like, the details go, because kind of what shines out to me is the last one was kind of about, obviously, love. And a lot of religions out there teach that God is love and stuff like that. And I like how you found kind of that similar conclusion, looking for it in ways that are, I guess you could say, like artistic in certain perspectives, I guess. See his holiness as shining lights and halos, but maybe in the hallways of overfilled bookstores and stuff like that. That to me is really cool, because it kind of is indicative of a style of yours, it seems, which is neat, because we've just had you on the show and I can already see like certain patterns and stuff, which is pretty cool. Certain themes, I should say. But
yeah.
I'd just say that I think that a lot of people fail to accept the beliefs of others and try to hold on to their own to the exclusion of all else. And I think that anyone that's willing to have a genuine conversation about faith and belief is great. You can believe in Christianity, you can believe in Catholicism, that can be how you cope with the world, but I think that there's more than enough room in the world for everyone, for people like you that want to see faith and belief in just what the world is and what magic there is there, and people that think there is a divine deity looking down over them and judging them and grading how they live their lives.
Yeah, and it's centered so much for me around writing and around words and literature, and that's that form of art. And it's something that I've always come back to, and I can weave a little bit of education talk in here because I am a student, and I'm the kid that switched their majors 3 times because I really just love a lot of things, and I'm not really sure, but English and writing is really a soft place to land for my heart and my soul and just everything. It like feeds who I am, and I think that is like the basis for that piece, is that there are so many beautiful things in life and so many aspects of the world that I see as spirituality, but above all else, just language, I think, is like the core for me of pretty much everything I do.
Man, that's cool. That's like the centerpiece of this show, I would say, so far. This is super, super neat. I had a conversation a long time ago with a friend of mine who, because I grew up in a very Christian family, and the person I had talked to when I came here to Chico State grew up in the completely opposite. So not hating Christianity or stuff like that, but just the far end of like atheism, I would say. And they had the same kind of sentiment that you had, which is they wanted that faith foundation, I guess you could say, and they didn't have it. And so we had a really interesting discussion on like she knew none of the cultural back references, Moses, things like that. She's like, never had teaching in it, and it always seems like something that is comforting for people and stuff like that. So it's neat seeing your perspective on where you've landed with that same kind of, I guess, want, maybe? Looking for a stability.
It definitely is like a desire for stability. I think that's like a perfect word for it. And, not to say that religion cures all your problems, of course, but, it's a sense of just belief and faith that that I've talked to people who are religious and they are going through horrible things or really hard times in their life, but they know that, you know, that God is there for them, or their church is there for them, or whatever sect of, you know, religion that you identify with. There's some sort of, you know, stronghold and comfort there that I really admire it a lot. And I try to take the, you know, as you were saying, try to take the side of understanding people's beliefs, even though I may not share them. I think it's a really beautiful topic that, you know, as you mentioned earlier, is a sensitive topic, and it is hard to talk about sometimes, which is a shame, because I wish that it was more talked about in a better light than I guess it is now. Yeah, not so aggressive,
argumentative, or something like that. Yeah, that is true. There's a lot of, I mean, obviously there's so many religions out there, but it's hard to talk about them unless you're in a class.
Yeah,
you know, you don't, when it's with people, it becomes something that they won't budge on, or they'll look at you very differently. So this piece I like, especially how, I guess, like, encompassing would be the word for it. You don't rule out this or that. You just say, I like the openness, and this is where I've come to for my own personal.
Yeah, as you know, different things I've gone through and different hardships, and have kind of shaped that, and that being the things that I have to fall back on are what I talk about in that piece, and something like kind of like a home for me.
Yeah, very neat. Any words, Brennan?
No, I think religion is is entirely a personal choice and a personal set of belief. What makes people feel comfortable and feel, I guess, at home in the world is the best way I can say.
That'd be a good word for it.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of close to the end of our show. I'm trying to think how I want to kind of finish this one off. I guess
I do have one more I could read, the one that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's one of my older ones, and it talks about a little bit, thank you, a little bit of a different perspective on love. This one is also about relationships and about things like that. You know, it's a piece that wasn't necessarily from a positive place. It was from a really difficult time that I was going through, personally, interpersonally. It was just, you know, kind of figuring things out and figuring out how to work with somebody else, you know, being in your life so intensely. Because I think I mentioned this earlier, somebody who feels things very intensely, and I have a hard time toning that down and building a relationship with myself and with those emotions and becoming okay with them. So yeah, it's pretty short, but this is what that one is about. Sometimes my heart aches from the pressure my love puts on it. It swells and my ribs creak to accommodate its growth, crying out for it to stop. But it will never become smaller, and I will never let it. There may come a time when my chest cavity bursts from the weight of a feeling heart, but it will never shrivel away into the depths of my diaphragm or cower in fear of outgrowing its home. I've trained it that way, for better or worse. Every time I am overcome with the sensation of powerful emotion, I try my best to remember that this is far better than the alternative. It is better to love too much than let your love go to waste. Love is not comfortable. It does not exist without fear or doubt, but it could also not flourish in the absence of peace, stability, or understanding. These are not small emotions. Your anatomy cannot contain them. So if you feel your heart pressing upon your ribs, crawling its way into your throat, or spreading into the pit of your stomach, love has come to greet you. So something that I think that, I notice more as I write and as I reread pieces of mine, is that I talk about feeling, mental emotion, emotions or feelings as very physical, and that comes from a personal experience type of thing, because I am a very, when I'm sad, I feel like my heart is actually heavier. When I'm, like I talked about before, when I am feeling something very overwhelming, it's like a very physical, there's a physical component too. So that's kind of where that came from, and just the making emotions smaller, and the push and pull between not pushing away how you feel and not pushing away your emotions, but also not letting it completely take over you. So yeah.
Any thoughts, Brendan?
I think this applies to a lot of things, because I know a lot of people that deal with anxiety and depression, and they have very similar things to this. Things just seem to build up and build up and build up, and the pressure doesn't release until it just hits a way beyond critical point.
Yeah.
I was going to say, too, pulling back, I guess, from this one and looking at everything you've read tonight, what I see, like, from the writing perspective, and I guess personal perspective, which is kind of cool to look at, is I really appreciate that your pieces strive to feel everything. Because you've talked about being someone who feels things overwhelmingly in some ways. And a lot of people will shut that down and not talk about it, or it'll come out in like a negative way. And you've taken a really deliberate stance on not shutting that down, and on being okay with exploring how far it goes in this direction, how far it goes in that direction, which you came and talked about on the piece that goes into, well, from 23 to 47 and stuff like that. I love that art style, because it's a really unique form of saying, I know this is something that is like powerful within me, as far as like how I view the world, my perspective on it, and my own emotions, and I don't really want to hide from that. So I want to explore all of it as much as I can, and it makes for like some really good pieces that are really fun to read.
Yeah. I think that emotions and mental health, even when you're talking about that, can be shied away from. You know, it's big emotions are scary when you're feeling things really intensely. You know, you're not generally encouraged to, you know, kind of like put that out in the world, but I think that it's important to put it out in the world, because there's a lot of people who feel the same type of emotions, or the same, you know, are cut from the same cloth, and it's reassuring to hear that it's not just you. You know, it can be alienating, it can be scary, but I think one of the biggest tools for healing is sharing, at least for me.
We are cut from the same cloth. Yeah. That's the whole kind of foundation of this radio show too, is to just get an insight on someone else's mind, because people don't talk about it enough. So, man, we've talked about God tonight, talked about love, talked about how hard it is, and then where you come from, like as far as writing goes. This has been like a packed show. This is awesome. Well, we've reached kind of near the end. Brandon, any last words you want to hit on, touch up?
No, but I think you are a very wonderful writer, and I think we can definitely hear. One thing I always heard in school that I've only really found after doing this show is that really good writers that we have on the show, you can hear the author's voice in the writing if you're just reading it, which I think you have, and I can hear you and I could hear you before you even showed up, and I was reading your pieces before the show. And I think you've got a really great voice, and you speak to the heart, and you speak with your emotions, and I think that's really great that you're willing to explore that and look at that.
And not just from one spot, too, which is cool. Sometimes we get pieces, and for better or for worse, I don't think they're on any side of the spectrum, but we get pieces sometimes that are in one vein. Yeah. You've managed to go down a lot, which is really, really cool.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the encouragement and the creation of a positive space, and because, it's terrifying to share your own art in any form, you know, not just writing, but pertaining to the show, writing. It's tough, but I think, as I said before, it's important. Sharing is a mode of healing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the step tonight. This was super cool.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll have to have you back again when you write more pieces, and then when you have your book, you'll have to tell us where it's coming and all that stuff, because we'll have you back on again for a third or fourth show, you know, all that stuff.
After my book tour.
After your book tour, yes, if you have time for us small people. Well, thank you, Sarah. This has been awesome. Any shout-outs you want to do last minute? Say hi to your dad or anyone? Or?
I mean, anybody who's listening, anybody who I don't know, anybody who I do know, I appreciate you listening and listening to the thoughts of my crazy brain.
Wonderful brain. This has been a cool show. Thanks, Sarah. Well, this has been Write.onair. I hope everyone has enjoyed it as much as we have. This has been a pretty darn cool show, if I say so myself. Write.onair is made possible by the generous contributions of KZFR supporters and by Harrison Daily Wright Accountancy Corporation in Chico. Harrison Daily Wright, specializing in accounting and bookkeeping services, auditing, tax preparation and planning, and management support services for nonprofit organizations and more. To reach Harrison Daily Wright, call 895-1209. Have a good night, everyone.